You're listening to the Penteract Poetry Podcast, hosted by Anthony Etherin.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Penteract Poetry Podcast. This is the second of a series in which Clara and I shall together be interviewing fellow small press publishers.
Our guests this time are Dani Spinosa and Kate Siklosi of Gap Riot Press. We met up with Dani and Kate a couple of weeks ago and began by asking Dani how she first got interested in poetry.
I got into poetry because I had the best high school English teacher of all time. His name is Glenn Hayes. He's also a poet, and we had like this wonderful writer's craft class, and we made a literary magazine for our high school in that class. It was so cool. It was called The Painted Door. I think they're still running it at my old high school, so that's awesome. And then I just kind of never stopped. That was it. I got the bug. I never really loved anything else. So I went to school and did almost all English classes, like the bare minimum of electives. And that's where I found this lady. Really, it's just like a pretty straight line for me from Glenn Hayes to Kate Siklosi, I think.
Yeah, like mine's pretty similar, actually, and like I also had a really great high school English teacher, Mr. Giancarlo. If you're out there listening, which you are not, but maybe, who knows. But also, like, I think I really got interested in literature and poetry from a young age, but it wasn't really until I met Gregory Betts in my undergrad at Brock University that I really he introduced me to B.P. Nicol and all of these like cats that I now grew up with in terms of experimental poetry. And I think it was really that point that it really just opened my eyes as to what's possible. Like, I always kind of loved traditional poetry. I actually, before I fell in love with experimental poetry, I was maybe going to do my master's in romanticism. And so I kind of loved the classics, but yeah, Gregory really opened me up to this other really beautiful world of breaking shit down. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And then, yeah, I met Dani early on in my PhD, and I wasn't really sure about her at first. We weren't sure, but we were like, okay. And then we became close, but that's for another podcast. No, I'm joking.
I feel like it has to be for this one now. What were you not sure about? I'm lovely.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, Dani, were you sure about Kate?
Was I sure about Kate? I mean, okay, so we both had gap teeth. So for me, that's an automatic, I like you better than another person just because you have a gap. It's going to start that way. But I guess my most vivid early Kate memory was her getting into a heated, drunken argument about poetry at a bar. That's the earliest Kate memory. So
did I arm wrestle anyone?
No, not that time. Not that time. But I was going to say it laid the groundwork for many more heated, drunken poetry fights in bars. But that was a win for me. I was like, yes, I mean, I don't want to fight with her. That's for damn sure. But I would love to watch her fight with other people about poetry for after.
And that sounds like an awesome podcast in of itself.
Yeah.
So it's drunk poetry fights.
You knew that you wanted to be on her side.
Or at least observing, away from, not on the other end of it. I knew that for sure.
And I mean, to be fair, Dani, I didn't mean that wasn't sure how I felt, but I mean, you were just Dani is Dani Spinosa. She's a force. She's so intense as a person. And actually, it's funny that people really put us together, but we have some really interesting differences. And I just remember being who is this woman? I don't know how to deal with her yet. I hadn't quite attuned myself to the Dani Spinosa experience.
Yeah, she's an acquired. Don't say it like that. She's acquired taste. She is. I understand. I do some crazy things.
But no, it's all good. And then yeah, we just became best friends, and everything that comes along with that. And I guess segueing into what I think is your next question, which is how did we start together doing this. I mean, Dani and I obviously are super interested in the same types of poetry, and we're really frustrated by the fact that, we if you want to publish experimental poetry in Canada in particular, you've got to go to a white guy to do it. And we were like, how can we, think about breaking down those silos a bit and being a little bit more inclusive in the poetry community. And, we were always kind of around the poetry community, but the poetry community can be in itself pretty exclusive. And so we just were like, how can we open space to like have other people come in and join us in this work and really just like hear more from people we need to hear from, but also, make it more inclusive and welcoming, and, have it be a space where people can try stuff on, and see how it goes. And so I'll let Dani finish the story because it's very close to her heart, how we actually started Gap Riot Press. But yeah, Dani, do you want to take it from there?
I mean, yeah, but I never have done it orally. I've always typed it out, so I might just cry a teens. It's okay. It's real. It's emotional. I guess because Kate and I are like people who make plans. We love to make a plan or have an idea for a project, and then we're busy and it's hard to turn the idea of the thing into the thing. And what made us do it was our beloved late friend Priscilla Uppel needed chapbooks for a play, and she was like, are you guys gonna actually do that thing? And we did because she pushed us, and then we never stopped doing it. So that was three years ago.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had a kind of interesting bittersweet start to this press, but
yeah, it feels good to have started it that way, and a thing that was so like serving other women and this communal space, and this, it was poetry, but it was also for a play, which was part of like a major theater festival here. So it was talking across disciplines and two other artists. It was like the right way to start this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You describe yourselves as a feminist press.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that influence your choices of the kind of things you publish? Because doing experimental poetry too, quite a lot of that doesn't really have any sort of political element to it. A lot of experimental poetry is really about poetry. It's a play with words. Mm-hmm. So how does that fit into an ideology?
The kind of experimentation and the kind of formal poetics that we like, especially, is taking that and returning it to the body and returning it to conversation, which is why I like that I'm having this conversation looking at Clara right now, who I think your work does that so much. Referencing poetry, working with the kind of meta-poetic tendencies of experimentation and this intellectualizing, and then bringing that, I love to bring it down to the like, half of my illegible visual poems are also about my IUD, like getting it right into like the nastiness of the body, the physicality, and that's been my favorite thing to publish. Our latest season is full of that. Even Franco Cortez's Of Fathers, which we just published, is very much about that, taking this linguistic play and bringing it down to the body as well. So that's been my favorite part of certainly this season.
Yeah, a lot of it does have to do with it does come back to the body, but it's not just a male masculine body. Like, it's all bodies, and all bodies can experiment, and all, minds can kind of come into this work. And so it's been really great to, like, once you open the door to those, to see how many different people are approaching experimental poetry in really radically different ways. And, I just think the world needs more of that.
My mind is going towards the edition of Guest that you edited and that you kindly included me in, and yeah, the variety in that was absolutely mind-blowing, and I think it's lovely when you get to give people freedom to experiment, to see what they come up with and how they interpret your call for submissions and what that means. How did you decide on that theme?
I think a lot of the experimentalism we're seeing is really digitally mediated, and we wanted to think about, because our world is so digitally mediated, like what it meant to kind of depart from that a little bit. And yeah, like we were literally like, we want to see the work of your hands. Like, what is your hands doing with those objects, and how is it interacting, and what does it produce in this kind of unmediated state? And it was lovely because of the variety, like you said, Claire, but like all of the stuff that we got was just so different, and really approached even that hand to object care in really different ways. And so it was really exciting to see like, to see all the what happens when you provide those kind of constraints for people, and like what they come up with.
And trying to break down the line that I think we were feeling for a long time between the intellectual, poetic work we were doing, say, in grad school, and the kind of like home touching, crafting work that we were doing in our houses. And we got we felt enriched by both of them in similar ways, I would say. And bringing them together changed the way we published, changed the way we wrote our own poetry. And also, I think, needing sometimes a little bit of distance from the computer, especially now that the computer is my workplace. I want to be as far away from it as possible. So I think that femcraft issue came from both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. I know in my work, I mix media and practical with digital all the time, and it is nice to get your hands dirty sometimes.
You both make a lot of visual poetry yourselves, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something we've noticed. Canada has a great tradition of that kind of experimental poetry.
Oh yeah.
In a way that a lot of other countries don't. In the UK, we're very focused on lots of lyrical free verse.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the question I always ask Canadians is, I hope you appreciate how good you've got it. Your traditions, the way that you embrace the avant-garde and the experimental.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think you're probably the first people we've interviewed who said they enjoyed poetry at high school. Because like
in the UK don't.
Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, I never liked poetry at high school. It was either my parents got me into it when I was a little kid, or I started at university. It's like we've never had the answer of, oh, my English teacher inspired me so much into poetry. It's all like, I hated poetry at school.
There is life beyond Chaucer, as it turns out.
I think we know we were quite lucky, though. Like, I don't think that our experience of like amazing English teachers that inspired us is indicative of what happens in high school here generally. I think we just like super, super lucked out. Like I don't think there are a lot of English teachers like the ones we were so lucky to have.
And I think that's the common thread. Like, everyone that I know that likes literature in general, in the way that we do, had a really great teacher at some point who really just was passionate about it and really understood how to make it relevant for young folks and all of that in a really way that's memorable. And and so that's the common theme. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to point out, Anthony, and we do have a rich visual poetry culture here, especially in Toronto. Like, Toronto is so has such deep roots in that regard. And so yeah, it's really kind of a really fun place to be and to kind of grow into poetry here. Everyone has made their their pilgrimage to Pinnacle Lane to see the engraved poem there, and to Coach House, and sat in the big chair upstairs, the magic chair. And there's a folklore and kind of a mythology around it, which can be problematic, if you ask me, to a certain degree, because we tend to put those people on these extremely high pedestals. But I think it's really beautiful and rich to kind of grow up with that kind of tradition when there wasn't one. But at the same time, for myself, some of the stuff that I've been getting into lately is so blurry in terms of it's not quite visual art and it's not quite poetry. It's something in the middle. And recently I discovered Astra. I'm going to butcher her Greek last name, so I won't say it. But she runs Poem Atlas, and she reached out to me and was like, can we exhibit some of your poetry in our online exhibit? And I was like, absolutely. And I started to get to know her work and these other works and these really like, you know, kind of messy, not really fitting well works that were like mine. And I was like, oh, like, because I didn't even really feel like a lot of people in Canada were doing that type of work. And so I always felt really weird about it. It's also hard to get published because it's in color. And I know that you guys so graciously publish in color, but like, that's pretty rare. And so it was really neat to find this like international community of something that I thought was really small and niche, but like there's such beauty in terms of the variety there. And I just felt immediately, especially with her being like, being a woman, like it was just a lovely connection. And we've, you know, to find and to have it be kind of this global thing is really neat. So.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you both about how you see that relationship between visual poetry and visual art, and at what points you think visual poetry just becomes visual art, because it seems to be something in the difference between drawing and writing, and there's no clear point where one becomes the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thing is always, I mean, I guess I come from a place where I think the stuff I do is like silly. I really love it, but I think I do like kind of silly work. So sometimes I think like visual poetry is what people do when they're not great as poets and not great as visual artists. So but I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in like, you know, like, if I don't ever imagine myself to be greatly skilled as a painter, God knows I've tried. Thank you, Angela, for all your hard work. And I'm never going to be greatly skilled as a lyric poet. I just don't see myself that way. So I give myself this like place in the middle where I get to just like play. And that's, I guess, the defining feature for me of the visual poem is that element of playing with that tension between visual art and graphic design and concrete poetry and whatever. Like, just, I don't know how and where we would draw these lines, but I think that the dancing around and amidst those lines, that's what the genre is. So I hope people don't take offense to that. Like, I don't mean that in an offensive way. I think about it as like, if I don't try to be good, I'm going to let myself have fun.
I don't think I know that mine is good or right. I mean, I think that's kind of like, it just is what it is. And like, I mean, Dani has this really beautiful way of saying like, you know, we need to be more comfortable about putting stuff out that isn't perfect, that we don't think is great even sometimes, and just see how it bounces off. Yeah, like I'm not quite sure when I make something if it's going to be good or not to other people. Like, I don't know that. And that's not really why I make it. And in fact, like, you know, I've been thinking a lot about how, like, when I'm working on collage and kind of like object type work, about like, it's so much for me about the making of it. And I don't really care what happens after that. You know what I mean? Like, and like, there's a magic to making that type of stuff and being with those objects that gets really missed in the final product. And so for me, it's just the process of making it. And so I don't really care like if it's good or not. It's just something that I like to do and really enjoy producing. And it just so happens that other people kind of like that too. And it resonates with people, you know? But yeah, I mean, my dad is so funny because I like, you know, kind of my love of Letraset comes from him to a certain degree. And I remember when I was first starting out, he's like, people want to publish this? And I'm like, yeah. And there's like a tradition of people who have published this. And he's like, but wait, people will like buy books of this? Like, he's still like so amazed that it's like a thing, you know? And so it's kind of, and I love that it exists in that kind of like, what is it? You know, like we've all been there, right? I'm sure you guys have too, explaining to people who are not, you know, poetry savvy, let alone visual poetry savvy. And they're like, but what is it? How does it mean? Like all these things, right? And you're like, it doesn't mean, just let it wash all over you. And they just look at you, you know, sideways from Sunday. But anyways, I don't think that answered your question at all, but that's how I feel. I just, yeah.
As a follow-up, because I know I struggled with this when I first started out with trying visual poetry. Did you ever feel guilty, like, I'm just having fun here, this isn't art, what am I doing?
But I think that shame is a thing that we all felt a little bit. Maybe I still feel it sometimes, especially because I'm working with a typewriter so much. So I know I'm working with this typewriter tradition, but then I can like like I was just working on a poem yesterday and I accidentally inverted 2 letters and I was like, oh, no problem. I'll like fix it in post. And then I just scanned it in and switched the 2 letters. And that's when I feel the guiltiest. I'm like, I am so sorry, BP, that you had to type this whole poem out again. And I just get to fake it. I just get to like switch. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's imposter syndrome stuff too. This thing of like, but when we look at something like the playful, lovely Vispo that we're looking at that we think is part of the greats, part of this canon of this genre, they also thought, how am I going to get away with this as a poem? And like, they also thought they were Beep was for sure like, these are just kind of cartoon doodles, but if you're loving it, I'll put it out there. So like, we're going to keep doing that, and whatever sticks or connects to someone is like, this lovely like surprise after. But I think we're no longer bogged down by that concern.
I suppose it's quite ancient, isn't it? People have always done these sort of things. I mean, I know Anthony will talk for hours about the Sator Square, or even you think of things like acrostics.
Have I been boring you?
Acrostics or like calligrams and things like that people have always enjoyed playing with words, or even like if you look at like medieval manuscripts and you've got the monks doing the marginalia. I'm a bit obsessed with marginalia. I don't know whether you guys have seen much of it.
It's a love language.
Amazing, all these little random doodles just because the monks were bored or just wanted to do something, and it's all that, isn't it? It's the playful. But
for sure,
I don't have a question on that. I just wanted to mention marginalia.
Actually, I can, if to redeem myself earlier, I can pinpoint down one of the times that I actually did definitively fall in love with Dani Spinosa was when early on in our friendship, she lent me a book, and I forget what freaking book it was, but Dani's marginalia is really funny. And I remember there was like a sentence that was like highlighted and like really frantically, and then the marginalia was like, "This makes me want to set shit on fire." And I
think it was working. I think it was like,
it was working. That's right. So marginalia is very powerful. It can bond people even.
For sure, I'm a big book defacer. I love to ruin a book.
Oh yeah.
That's the opposite of me. So, what about Clara and Kate? To deface or not to deface?
I'm not a defacer, but I must admit, as a free sample the other day when we were we've been looking at different printing options, and people send you samples, don't they, to show things, and I got a copy of something called Wreck This Journal, and I've just been using it as like this stress reliever doodle while I'm working, and it's great. It's a book, and every page tells you what you should do with it, like rip this page out and put it through the washing machine.
Oh, I love that.
Color in this entire page, rub food on this page, and I've just been working through it and really enjoying that kind of freedom that I would never do with a real book. I remember when I was younger, probably about 11, I had a copy of Jurassic Park, and I lent it to my grandmother, and she cracked the spine really badly on it, and I was so mad at her that obviously this black cover and all these white lines down it, and I couldn't tell her off, but I was really annoyed that my nice pristine book now had cracks down the spine.
Yeah,
I don't have a pristine book, man. Not if I've read it, it's sure not pristine. I crack a spine to start. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. I love getting like that feeling, just so then you can lay it flat too and do what you need to with it, like make it yours. Yeah, and I think I think a well-worn book is a well-loved book, and I read a lot in the bath, folks. Like that just drops in the water, and you just deal with it, and then you just move on with your life because, hey, like, I would like, I just think it kind of is a testament to its usability and its kind of love, and I dog-ear my pages 100%. I mean, as a grad
I do fold corners.
Yeah.
Come to the dark side, Clara.
Yeah, like as a grad student, I used to do it more, obviously, because I try not to read with a pen anymore whenever possible, just because I'm not reading for that type of work anymore as much. And so, but yeah, I think a well-worn book is a well-loved book, and I don't mind defacing.
See, in my mind, the only time it's acceptable is a cookery book, because that's how you can tell the best recipes, because they're the pages that are stuck together.
All those old grimy fingerprints and
Yes. But we make a lot of books with Gap Riot that need to be broken.
Yeah.
Yes,
we do, Dani.
Yes, of course, your lovely seals.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I do like that.
Yeah.
We had the wildflower poem that you had to plant, Andy Weaver's book you have to break into, Franco's book you have to break into. So I really like having a thing you have to rip. I think we're going to keep doing that more and more as we're getting good at.
It's just to torture me.
Yeah, just to torture you. Like,
when do I break the seal?
Maybe you could sew some up on both sides that you have to cut through.
Yes, I like that idea.
Right through the poem. I want you to have to rip right through it.
And then piece it back together.
Yeah. Good luck.
Oh, for people who can't see what's going on, Anthony is actually physically cringing in his seat right now.
But let's talk more about Gap Riot then. So you started 3 years ago, did you say?
Yeah, just over. Yeah.
How long had you known each other then?
Oh gosh,
I don't know.
We met in 2010, Dani.
Oh my god.
It seems like forever though. Like honestly, I feel like I've known this bitch forever. But I think it was 2010.
So 10 this anniversary. That's nice. Yeah. Okay. I'll get you something.
I think it was at least 6 years, 6 or 7 years. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I would not recommend starting a press with someone you don't know that well because it's a lot of messy work and figuring stuff out. And the only really reason why Dani works so well together is because, again, we know each other so well. And we just, like, we get asked this a lot too, like, how do you manage a press between the two of you? And, like, honestly, we don't have any method. We just somehow end up doing what we need to do in equal parts, and it works out. And we know that the other person's going to take care of it. And it's honestly like very little bureaucratic work for us to work together on this. So it's kind of funny.
If you're anything like us, you must have realized, looking back, that you've learned a lot about how to run a press in the last few years, because it seems like there's not a lot to do when you start out, and then you gradually learn, oh no, there's a lot.
For sure.
This.
Yeah.
Yes.
To anyone listening who might be starting a micro press, what could you advise them on?
Oh gosh.
Well, you know what? I mean, I guess this is a bit of a cop out, but I don't think we could have done this if we didn't start it by talking to other people who were doing it in their own different ways. Like we sat down and had coffee or drinks and heard a bunch of different ideas and then pieced together bits and pieces so that we could do it our way. Like I think that was the most important thing, was just hearing how many different options there were.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, Dani and I have made choices about this press that have made it easier to run because we both have full-time jobs, and, you know, so we just kind of, I would advise people to just understand how much time you have, you know, and especially if it's just yourself. Like, I would not want to do this all myself. And in fact, I wouldn't. It's just too much work, even with the choices that Dani and I have made, like to work with a printer, etc. You know, and so I think you just have to be really honest with yourself. And even like, you know, we publish quite a bit. Like we publish at least like 6 to 8 books a year, which is actually quite a lot. But again, the model that we built kind of allows that to be possible. And so, you know, I think there's just a lot going into like what you're willing to put into the press and kind of like how much, you know, time, money, care, you know, like sanity you want to put in / lose. You know, all of these things kind of go into it. And so, and also like we just kind of did it. Like we just found, like, also just like we're still learning. Like even this last season, we made some mistakes, and we just learned from them. And so it's like an ongoing thing, you know. And we kind of just pivot as we need to, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's no point where you've learned everything, is there?
Oh my goodness, no.
And you certainly have to be agile.
Mm-hmm.
I think
that's it. The world around you changes.
Yeah.
So you have to that. I mean, we've seen that in the most extreme way recently.
Yeah.
I suppose, I mean, what if any ways have you adapted your ways of working to cope with the current situation? Because for us, for example, we were intending to have 3 big launch party events for our summer collection, which we've now actually changed, and we're doing it via this podcast and via Twitter Q&A sessions with the authors on the launch date. Is there anything like that you've done, or that you found effective or not effective, or?
Yeah, we're both smiling because we just did our launch 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
For this season, we had like a Zoom call that was like a roundtable conversation about the books and about small press publishing now and what that means. And we also got the poets for this season to send us videos of them reading or performing their work. So we have a little like launch party on our website that you can drop into and check out at any time. And it's a bit like as if we could have had the party, which at least I am missing for sure.
I'm missing it too, but like we also had this really awesome discussion about how how the pandemic and like being virtual makes it more accessible for people to also like be there and kind of like experience things. And even like one of our authors, Zoe Morris, they live in Kentucky in the States. And so, we would normally just not be able to have them at our launch because, like we're small press, we can't fly them over. But so weirdly, I think, we felt way more connected to our authors this time around because we were so intentional about it. And it was really beautiful. And I, Zoe again, like they made this gorgeous performance art piece for their poetry. Like it is phenomenal and gorgeous and beautiful. And we're just like, this is so much cooler even than like just a reading. And so we were just like, we're kind of amazed at how we just decided to do this different thing and see how it played out. And it was really fucking cool. Like there's a lot of really neat like readings on there, and really things like a lot of the things that came out in conversation, were just really beautiful. And we really felt a really neat connection, I think, this time around. Yeah.
That's great. And so this is all up on your website now?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so we can link to that in the description.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, I think we feel that in some ways doing things virtually has been better because we are international. We've published quite a few people from not the UK, and like you say, it's not always practical.
Yeah.
I mean,
and we don't live in a city. We're out here in the countryside, so it's hard for us to go to events anyway.
So it becomes very expensive. Like if you've got to go down to London, for example, and then get a hotel for a couple of nights and hire a venue and everything else. So
for sure,
it's been quite interesting. And then that fact we can reach people. I think the toughest thing for us has been picking a time of day where we're hopeful most people can join us. And I think especially because like later this year we're doing not the next book, the book after is Canadian, isn't it? So
that's Gary Barwin.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, amazing.
Wow, you got some good stuff coming out.
All these Canadians, isn't it?
Gary's is really colourful. It's amazing. It's
I
very,
love
very bright.
work. Yeah, it's really neat. I have one on my wall. I love it so much. Yeah.
So it's good in that way because obviously we couldn't get him over to the UK, and so virtual does seem like the right way to go in some respects.
Yeah, it's a shame to miss out on book fairs, which I know that's something you've both done, and again it's something that Canada seems to be very good at, small press fairs. Have you found that that's a better way to sell your books than online marketing?
Not better, I would say, Dani.
It's different. I mean, this season we sold more books than we've ever sold. It's been a really amazing in terms of sales. But one thing that I think isn't really happening on the online store is like people will come and be like, hey, I'm here to get, so and so's book. What else do you have that's good? And we'll be like, what do you like? Are you into whatever? And make a recommendation that's catered to them. And they pretty much always buy, like they'll flip through and they almost always buy whatever book we recommended. So that you lose a bit, but we're just trying to, I guess, make the books sell themselves a little more, sample poems and flashy copy, I guess.
Yeah, so it's that, isn't it? It's that the active selling you can't do. You can't say, well, which poets do you like?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then you'll like this book. But I suppose and that's why I suppose things like social media become important, that you can engage with people. But
yeah, and it's kind of fun. Like I as you can probably tell, like Dani and I have a particular brand to our press, and we have a lot of fun with social media because of it. Like, we really like to have some fun with it. And I think social media branding and marketing and all those things like allow you to do that in a really neat way. Obviously, when you meet us, you realize that is literally just us translated into human beings. But, it's not an act, actually, but it's exactly who we are. But it's kind of fun to, like, really, I think one of the things I'm most proud of about our press is that we have some kind of cohesion between, like, our mandate and who we are. And we've never really wavered in that. And yeah, we're just, like, really... we feel really lucky and privileged to be able to do this work. And so we never forget it. And we like to just kind of, be as inclusive as possible with how we do things. And, so it's been kind of nice to have that, like, filter through every aspect of how you actually do your press, like, to the point where, like, our printer is this independent printer who prints out of his garage, and that was really special during the pandemic when I went to pick up books. And he's like, this was like my only order for things in the last month. And I was like, I'm just so happy to support that. And we also
that's very nice.
Hired an editor and an artist this time too to work on some special projects with us. And so we've been able to build, like, a pretty sustainable press model that, like, allows us to really collaborate and have this kind of community of production, which I think has always been really important to Dani and I. It's not about us and ourselves. It's about the whole Gap Riot community, and everyone we're able to support and uplift through the work. And so we feel really fortunate to be able to, have kind of maybe even unintentionally built a model that allows for that to happen. So
yeah, that was always, like, the thing that I was most excited about typesetting the books and cover design and that sort of thing. Was being able to kind of, like, form a bond with the work and get something out of it as we turned it into a book. And then when we had that launch conversation the other day and we asked them, why publish with small press, I, like, could feel my heart growing, because every single poet was like, the relationship with the press, and you grow together. And I guess I wasn't sure if they were feeling it on the other side. It might have just been me with the poem, but it was me with the poet. And it's been, that's been the best part of it. I don't even know what the question was anymore. Are we answering a question here?
I think you are.
I think so, yeah. I was going to say, because we were talking about your identity, I suppose, and I love your brand and your identity and your logo. And then when we met up last year, you guys were there we go.
Yeah,
you guys were basically what I imagined from your brand. You sell yourselves, and it's there. And it's lovely. And I agree with what you say about building small presses would be nothing if not for the poets. And it does have to be a partnership.
Recently, we made our submission criteria very strict, and it almost looks like we're being quite tyrannical. But really, it's because we want to make sure we're not just getting the right work. We want the right people. We've realized that when you publish someone, you have to work alongside them closely.
For sure.
You then have to try and sell the book together. And it is a real working relationship. So we want to make sure we're with someone we like.
Yeah. That's fair.
And who's going to pull their weight as well? Not being harsh, someone who's going to pull their weight as well. It's no good you putting your heart and soul into making a book if they're going to do one tweet and then move on to the next project.
Right. Yeah, we've never really had a problem with that, like, on our end. I mean, But yeah, I totally see what you mean. I mean, it's like, let's be honest, this is a thankless job, and you do it because you love it, and that's all. And yeah, it doesn't always get even recognition isn't even the first of it. I think a lot of it is understanding, and Dani and I are actually engaging in a dialogue, and we're going to publish something soon on the small press, and just like it's called In Praise of the Limited Run, because we get a lot of pressure as we've been growing our press from bookstores and other booksellers. Great attention, but a lot of pressure to keep our books in print. And we don't print in high volumes, and we kind of got into this to not print in high volumes and to not have that kind of industrial aspect to our work. And so we've been thinking a lot as we've been growing about like why, just checking in with ourselves about like, why are we doing this work? How do we maintain what we want to do out here and what we don't? But how do we also support people, get their work out, be really, because a lot of the people we publish are emerging, and we want to make sure that we're supporting them. But at the same time, we got in this for a small press business. Like, this is what we're doing here. And so it's just been kind of interesting to see, I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world about small press and like what it does and why we do it and all of these things. And so, yeah, something we always kind of think about.
Yeah, I think you kind of preempted one of the things we were going to ask, which is, do you have any idea of where you want to go with this? Do you want to expand? Because the journey we've been on is that we started with the smallest of the small, just these single fold leaflets for the first 2 years, really, wasn't it? Mm. And then we tried out a book, which is just some of my short poems from Twitter. Then we tried an anthology, and we realized, hang on, people actually want to buy these. Because as much as we enjoyed making the leaflets we found just haven't really sold. Whereas when we started doing books, people were buying them. And we realized, okay, well, perhaps the bigger we get, the more we can spread this work around, it's work that we feel isn't being well represented, especially in the UK. Mm-hmm. So we feel we can do that service. But of course, we also totally get the idea of a limited run, like just a perfect 50 copy edition that is there, and then it's gone forever, and you've got to try and track it down if you want a copy. So there's beauty in that. But are you intending to stay the same scale, or have you entertained the notion perhaps of getting bigger?
I mean, we've talked about putting out an anthology, which we probably will soon. Our printer has the ability to do the proper binding and stuff, but no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think that's what Gap. I mean, I have dreams of one day moving out to the country and running a press from there, but that press is not Gap Riot. I think Gap Riot needs to stay doing these small things. I don't think we want it bigger. In fact, I think we both wish that we had started maybe a little smaller than we did, because we got a few backlogs here. Just I think this is a tiny little baby Gap Riot, and I think on some level, I think we want to get maybe even smaller in terms of the intricacy of the craft work in the books themselves, which will necessitate a smaller run. And that's it for me. That's what I want it to do. I have dreams of bigger publishing, sure, but that's different. I think it's
I suppose there's something in a radical, you've described yourself as a radical press. There's something that goes with the idea of pamphleteering, and then a small run ephemera that seems to just go together. Whereas a big, a huge press called Gap Riot that's called itself radical, perhaps, maybe that doesn't gel.
Yeah. And again, I suppose as well, it ties in, I suppose, with you saying about limited print runs. If you've got these things that have care and attention, you can't mass market them, and then they do lose their appeal, don't they? If you've got this thing that you've got to hand stitch or apply a wax seal to, or we know people who have got their own printing presses and they're making these mimeograph things or whatever in their garage, you can't mass produce that, and you have to set a limit because it does take time. I mean, I know for us there's one leaflet that's we design that's hand stitched, and every time one comes in I'm like, I've got to get the kit out and I've got to sew it.
Yeah, we know that.
Nice, and I love the piece, but it's like, can we, when does it go out of print so I don't have to keep getting the sewing kit out, the binding kit out to do it?
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, I mean, but I always kind of feel not bad's not the word, but like, Kyle Flemmer and the Blasted Tree, like every one of his works is so careful and so gorgeous and so curated. Like Michael Castile's with Petals of Sky Press, also super similar, like really focus on like the small object, like ephemera of something. And, I had something published with Kyle and I was just blown away by the amount of care that was in each individual book. And he really is just a master of that craft. And it's something that I kind of aspire to. So in a weird way, I guess, like, I would like to go even smaller, not bigger, right? Like get small, get my hands dirty even more in the craft and really, because I think it makes just such a big difference. Like that's why at the end of the day, you go to a small press, because you are going to get that level of care and that kind of collaboration and creativity and beauty, right? But yeah, like those should only exist in limited form, right? Those are not infinite. And I think that that's the real beauty of it too, right? So yeah, no, I mean, who knows, but we're really just happy trucking along. And, we'll try an anthology. We'll try, we've tried things before, just seeing how they work. And, but yeah, are we going to be getting into big, huge, bound books? Like, no, probably not.
No, I don't think so.
We've stopped doing leaflets now, and I already miss it.
Yeah.
I might start doing it on the sly. Wake up in the middle of the night and go make a leaflet.
Yeah. I was sad when Penteract stopped making leaflets, because I was like, oh, I love them so much and they're so easy to like give and share. But yeah, it's like I totally understand they're very laborious at the same time. But yeah, like, right, like, I mean, we haven't even gone that small, but that's the roots of small press right there, right? Like printing off something, giving it left, right, and center. And there's still people that do that, and it's really great. But yeah, just different models, right? And that's the beauty too. Like small presses, all of these things. There's so many different ways to approach it, and none is better or more correct than the other, right? It's just how you approach your work and what you like to do and what gets you up in the morning.
Yeah, we need them all.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with Blasted Tree. It's been so interesting sort of watching that press evolve and the things they're doing, and it's always,
well, again, it's another one that started around the same time that we all did.
Yeah, no, it's just been great to like join that community though and see all the different things that people are doing and how they kind of, it's so different. Every small press is so different in how they approach their work, and I think that's such a strength, right? Yeah, and we learn all the time from people, and they kind of learn from us, and we kind of just, I don't know, it just feels like a really beautiful community. And I know for Dani and I in particular, like, I really lament the fact that poetry and writing has been so co-opted by the university and by the institution. And when I joined the small press community, I was just so happy to be around a community of writers that majority or a lot of them aren't academics. Like some of them are, but like it's just nice to have that kind of unacademic space to produce writing and to write in and to have these conversations, and so yeah, like I like that about it,
But do you think it's too dominant? Do you think the academy is too dominant in the poetry world? Yes,
I do, for sure. I mean, I don't know about the UK, what the situation is there, but I've had a couple situations over the past couple years where, I'm friends with poets who are not also practicing academics, and the way in which the academy consumes their work without regard for their labor is really, really brutal and really disenchanting. And I just think like at a certain point it made sense. Poets were like, how do I also make money to sustain myself? Oh, I can teach this, I can do this. But then I think what has happened is poetry has become kind of inaccessible, and it has become this academic elite thing. And I just kind of really lament that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and it's also that the academy tells one story about the kind of work that's being produced. So a few years ago, I started working with this collective called Meet the Presses here in Toronto. That's like not they're not academic at all in the way that they run this. And it's like an indie literary market. It's like a small press book fair, and they run the BP Nickel Chapbook Award. They facilitate that. And putting together the list of presses for that event, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how many like long running, fabulous small presses, micro presses there are running in my city.
Yeah.
That I just didn't know about at all, because one, like, the Academy has a tendency to pick a poet, pick a poet or pick a style or pick a whatever, and then you forget that there's this whole other group that poet is working in and having a conversation with that doesn't get included when you pick and choose a little bit like that. So it's been important to me to try and make those two places talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's been important for me to make that other side shut up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think
I have also left the Academy though, so I've got a little bit of a bend, but
no, I think you could say very similar for the UK situation.
There's a general problem with poetry though, which I haven't been afraid to discuss on this before, which is that it's not very popular compared with certain other art forms.
Yeah.
And then this does allow some people to take control of the poetry world.
Yeah.
And in such a way that it will exclude a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it really is, it's just a consequence of the fact that this isn't something that engages the public the way it should. I think.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But again, like Dani said, like small press, I think, does that in a really unique way that that isn't academic or isn't academic led or isn't kind of, maybe even about pedagogy at all. It's about sharing and community building and just being generous and, and really, like, my favorite thing about going to a fair is, like, there's a couple that we go to that are, they get a lot of foot traffic. And my favorite thing is people just stumbling in on this thing that they don't know anything about. And they're just like, what are these? And they like pick it up, and they probably maybe haven't even really read poetry in the last, like, since school or something. But then they open it and they're just are full of wonder. Like, what is this? Why are people producing it? Like, what is this thing that I'm holding, and what's the energy around all this that's in this room? And I just love that kind of surprise and, like that excitement around poetry. And so I think that small press is one of those few places that magic still really happens around poetry. And I think that's kind of why we're here, is to kind of cultivate that magic a little bit and to kind of ensure that it is preserved and continued. And again, that more people can join in making it. That's what I would say in terms of the strengths and the kind of possibilities of small press.
I just want to rant really quickly that isn't it also how we learn about it? Like, I keep thinking about you saying, like, oh my gosh, you're the first people who have said you enjoyed poetry in high school.
Yeah.
Like, if everybody was taught poetry in a way that was, are you having fun reading this? Is this beautiful and interesting? Yeah. And not, does this have some secret hidden meaning that you have to be smart enough and whatever to get at? Then, why wouldn't it be as popular as any other kind of art form? I think we need to stop teaching it as some kind of elitist, impenetrable thing when it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, when it could be fun.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no one way of looking at it, like, and it's hard to teach in a way, but when you release yourself from that, it's really beautiful to see the students pick it up and be like, oh, and make stuff with it that, and they're always like, is this the right way to look at this poem? And you're like, there is no, I mean, you have to support it with evidence if you're going to make an argument about it. But like, there's no, do you know what I mean? Like I think you can tell those people that were kind of taught to like look at poetry as this kind of through a singular lens and through this kind of like, and also that, like, because I teach a lot of, or in the past, a lot of electives, and like the students that come in and were told that they would never understand poetry by people, or they just had this like they just didn't approach it with a lot of confidence because they're like, oh, that's something that is not accessible to me. And so how can we like think about, especially as the university is kind of, the humanities and English departments are kind of becoming obsolete, like how can we also make small small press, not even just small press, but how can we make poetry more accessible? How can we make it relevant for people? And how can we really get people excited about it so that we can preserve the experiences that we've had for our generations to come? Like, I want to make sure there's something like small press in the generations to come. You know, I want to make sure that that doesn't die out and that there is like rejuvenated energy around it. But I think that we have to really take a look at tradition and all these things that we've been really relying on, and how can we kind of innovate and really make things fresh and again, just accessible and inclusive for people.
Exactly, yeah. I know that there are lots of people in this country who look at the majority of the works we publish and would say it's not poetry. So already we're excluded.
Yeah.
And it's because of this, as you said, a narrow definition of what poetry is. But also with the fact that poetry isn't very popular, that does at least afford us the chance to build something and not be too far behind the mainstream. We can almost produce things that sell as well as mainstream poetry, because the whole thing is so desperately unpopular.
Right.
You know, we have that at least. That's you can build these communities and you can build these small presses that actually do have an impact.
For sure.
Yeah, and that poetry that sells relative to other art forms that sell, it's like relatively low stakes. So we can, you know, the highest selling what's the highest selling poetry in the world is not. Yeah, I guess. Or I don't know.
That's quite a lot. Apart from her.
That's quite a lot. She sold like quite a lot, and everyone was like, that was crazy because it was poetry, right? That was what was so surprising about it. So yeah, we get to fuck around because it's not popular. So maybe I don't want it to be maybe I don't want it to be that popular. I don't know. Maybe it's like weed getting legalized. Maybe it's like, yeah, kind of ruins everything. I haven't seen a drug dealer in a really long time. I haven't seen anyone, I guess, but especially a drug dealer.
Our next book is going to come out in like a sketchy baggie that Dani's going to like disseminate on the corners of Toronto.
Don't you hear stories of like small press and independent music and hippie stuff that they were making in the 60s and 70s that had secret acid in it? You hear stories of that all the time. So like, does anybody sell acid? Yeah, just put this I mean, if that is a thing that I would do if I had no consequences and unlimited resources, is I'd make a poem that you could cut a piece off and it's acid and you ate the poem and it tripped you. Absolutely, I would make that.
Gap Riot, the black market edition.
Yeah, for real.
There's a challenge actually. It's trying to see how many different senses you can engage with a work of art. You know, it's not a visual element. A poem could smell.
Taste.
What else?
You could have it taste. You could make it on edible paper, couldn't you? Like print it on rice paper, and
it would have to physically move as well. So it'd be like on a wheel.
We absolutely could make an edible book on rice paper with food dyes. Why? I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Lettra said it on rice paper before, and it's kind of fun, right? And like Maria Chandel, like the one of my influences with Lettra said, like a lot of her artwork was done on rice paper, and like it has this like kind of beauty to it. But yeah, then you can also eat it, I guess. So you want to consume that. Like I don't know, like Lettra said doesn't sound organic.
3D printing. You could like print poems out of chocolate.
Ooh.
You can get 3D food printers.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I convinced my work to buy one because I don't think it'd be necessary. A place I used to work was considering it. Like they were a fiercely Welsh company, and they wanted to be able to put a Welsh dragon on bread rolls. So they were
I'm just enjoying the phrase "fiercely Welsh."
So they wanted to buy this food printer just so they could put a dragon on top of a bread roll.
I love that commitment.
I do too. I'm in. Do it.
It's the ultimate limited edition, isn't it? It comes in an edition of 50. They've all been eaten.
You have to
Limited
eat them
low
before they
run.
go off.
That's funny.
Pizza poetry. You can do it. They'll pipe the tomato sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the bit where you get to plug things, not just Gap Riot, but also individually. I know, Dani, you have a book out.
Oh, her. Yeah.
That old thing.
Yeah. That old thing. Yes, I have a book out, but it almost doesn't feel like it because that launch was a thing that was supposed to happen at the beginning of April. So this is actually kind of the closest to launching it really that I've been able to do. I do feel like weirdly sad about woo! Get into it. But her name is OO or ooh or oh or uh-oh, whatever you want to say. 2 O's, typewriter poems, out with Invisible Publishing. And it's pink and black on the inside. And it's my favorite thing that I've ever done. And it's stupid. And it's mostly about my IUD. And I love it. Yeah.
It also has an interview with Dani and I, high as fuck at the end. So you're welcome.
Yeah, we are intensely stoned for that whole conversation. That ties in the drug conversation too. I think. It was a blast, that conversation at the back. It's weirdly my favorite part of the book.
But yeah, and we just released our season 5. We have some really, really gorgeous works in there by Trez Mason-Pierre, Ashley Hind, Zoe Morris, and Franco Cortese, and they're all up on our shop, and they're just delightful. Really beautiful stuff coming out this season, so we're really proud of that. And like Zoe Morris's that book, it's their first book coming out too, so that's so exciting. We love first books, and it's just really, really wonderful. And yeah, they're all super beautiful. So people should definitely check them out, although we're almost sold out of most of them. But
yeah, we are almost sold out. And I think
the second printing.
Yeah, I think this might be it for them. I think that we'll send them out into the world and lay them to rest. What else?
Oh, congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, so looking ahead to next year and beyond.
Oh, God.
No, you don't want to.
Girl, I can't even look ahead
I don't blame you. No one wants to look beyond this year now.
Right? We're gonna start reading soon. We had to take a nice long break from the slush pile, but from what we've noticed, there's already amazing things in there waiting for us. So when our eyes are rested from this typesetting and printing and launching amidst all of this, we'll get back to reading. But I think we needed to give ourselves a nice break.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to publish like fall and spring, and so yeah, we'll get back to it for the fall. And we're thinking of putting out also like an anthology, and so we'll send out a call for that sometime maybe in the fall. And maybe do some screen printing, because in Franco Cortese's video reading, he like made this really like gorgeous Gap Riot shirt that he has on, and I was just like, oh, we don't even have any for ourselves. We have buttons, but I'd love to have t-shirts and stuff like that, just because they're fun and our logo's really cute. And so
Stace for that logo, because we've been talking about it the whole time.
Yes.
So much gratitude for Stace. I guess she's Schmidt McLean now, because she got married. Who's this amazing graphic designer artist friend of ours who did this amazing logo that's better than we could have ever. It's perfect. We love her.
Yeah, I love your logo. Yeah, you need to get things printed. I mean, we have a dog bandana with our logo on for
amazing
when she comes to shows.
She hates wearing it.
Yeah, she's the Penteract pup.
We have a Gap Riot pup. She's large and in charge, our Bonnie girl.
Is that your Bernard? Your son Bernard? Oh, she's lovely.
Saint Bernard, yeah, she's funny. She has come to some of our launches, actually, or one at least. Our last one she came to. It was really funny.
Yeah, Kafka came to ours and she had her lovely purple and black bandana.
So cute. How about you guys? You guys are coming up with some things, Gary and Franco, and
we have 7 books for the second half of 2020.
Oh wow!
Which we decided, of course, before we knew that the world was going to become a lot more. So it's a very stressful time.
So we've
got only 6 books we're going to do next year. We've decided what 4 of them are, so we're on the lookout for a couple of manuscripts for anyone listening.
Yep. So we're launching 5 this summer, and we're just about to launch the 5th. So it'll probably be launched by the time this airs. Gary's is the last one, and then we've got a couple for the autumn.
Amazing.
Lots of Vispo.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, you remain, one of my favorite presses. I love the work that you guys have put out, and it continues to surprise me. And I love how you guys are always kind of rethinking what you're doing and how to be sustainable. And I think we're kind of shared in that too, right? And so, yeah, like I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys put out. Like, yeah, and it's awesome to just have this kind of cross-Atlantic connection, with people. And it's, the last couple of years, even just joining this community has really opened up to this, like, gorgeous global world of small press and people who just love the work that we do.
There's lots to be positive about amongst all the negative things.
And we're just happy to be here, feeling lucky to be here and do this work with y'all.
Really lucky.
Well, on that note then, it's been great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
And to be able to talk
to us. Thanks for having us. We should do this more often.
To discover more, visit us at penteractpress.com.